All right, so we are talking about the most innovative companies in South Africa, and we can't talk about the most innovative space without talking about space. And here to talk about just that is Jonathan Lun. He is from Hypernova Space Technologies. Jonathan, welcome. Wesley, I'm going to hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lance, and welcome, Jonathan, once again. We are excited to finally get to talk to you and get to know yourself more, but also get to know Hypernova Space Technologies even more. Tell us about yourself. Who is Jonathan?
Sure. So my name's John. I grew up in Joburg, actually, in the old neighborhood of Kensington.
Yeah.
Loved it there. And in the last couple of years, I've moved down to the Western Cape to actually be part of a hub of companies and activity around the space industry.
Yes.
Not a lot of people know that there's actually activity in South Africa around space technology.
That is true. People think about space and they think about other parts of the world, and no one even considers Africa when we talk about the space industry, if you want. So tell us about the space industry, particularly in our continent in South Africa. What kind of activities do we see right now?
Sure. So there's kind of two different arms around that. There's obviously the government involvement around space. We've had quite a lot of history around supporting space activities for other nations. We've got the South African Space Agency and Department of Science and Technology and DTI. And we've also got the other side, which is this commercial private group that's starting to form around serving South African technology to international clients. And so Hypernova really formed as, I guess, a culmination and inspiration from that to also help serve the space community.
Interesting. When we looked at Hypernova Space Technology, we wondered at some point, and especially myself, why a startup in South Africa would consider going into this tough industry. I mean, what motivated you to go into this as a startup?
Sure. So I loved space since I was a really young kid. I've always wanted to be an engineer, and I was inspired by things that happened with the space shuttle program and with the moon landings. And I kind of had this focus that I wanted to be involved in this inspiring and innovative field. And so I ended up studying mechanical engineering. I took my studies further, got involved with the space industry. And then, Hypernova is really a culmination of work that I think can help really make a big impact in the industry right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenges in the space industry. When I talk about challenges, I mean, there's so much to solve. I mean, just getting up there is one big, massive challenge. What solutions are you bringing? What are you trying to solve?
Yeah. So I think maybe about 20 years ago, companies like us probably would have a very hard time to get started and exist because access to space was just so difficult. And now with companies like SpaceX reducing the cost of launch and making access to launch hardware into space a lot easier, now it's actually the better time than ever now to build a space company. So the problem that we're trying to solve is not about how to get into space, but how do you move around once you're already there. So a lot of satellites, they don't have these engines to avoid colliding with other objects or changing their orbit or just being able to do a lot more and stay up for longer in space. So Hypernova is building a product or series of products to solve that problem by making these small rocket engines that are simple and easy for people to use to maneuver around in space.
Interesting. And are you already making impact? What kind of impact are you making currently or that you're hoping to make in the future?
Sure. So we are thinking a long term beyond just satellites. So really the core technology is around using ordinary metals as a fuel source for rockets. So that's quite a big game changer because all rocket fuel so far has been these really expensive, rare and dangerous fuel sources. And we're going to flip that totally around and say, let's use something as common as as metal as a fuel source. And that totally opens up the field for not just getting fuel out there that's only available on Earth, but also out there possibly in space. And really opening up like an infrastructure for transporting things around.
Yeah, interesting. It's amazing to see such solutions really coming out of our country. When we look into the future, what do you see? What role do you think South Africa will be playing going forward, or even the continent in this space?
Sure. So there's a really key opportunity now for African countries and South Africa to really play more of an active role in the space industry. Right now we're seeing not just the Western countries, but also Asia and like India and Japan and China really getting involved with space. And they all recognize that this is going to be some of the biggest, most vibrant economies that can happen in the future. So I think the biggest thing that African countries can do is really help and enable commercial, I think, activity to happen, not just with funding, but I think also with legislation, making it easier and helping companies connect with the global community.
Yeah.
I just want to interject here and just ask some layman's questions. So is it very difficult for a company that is based here in South Africa to be working with massive organizations dotted all around the world? How do you go about that?
Sure, that's a great question. So certainly there are challenges with being so geographically far away from countries like the US and China. But I think that a lot of what has been done before already as around, people understand that space is an international business, and there are always people working remotely all the time. So I think definitely as a company, we need to have an international perspective, not just think about South Africa on their own. If we have companies and customers that are a lot in Europe or in the US, then it makes sense for us to set up there. Just out of interest, one of the great things about South Africa is that we're in a very similar time zone to Europe. So we can actually serve those customers quite well because of that time zone similarity, which is kind of a fun fact.
Now, I can imagine that the space industry is a very niche industry.
Sure.
What kind of supporting industries are there around your industry specifically that you need help with? I mean, is there that infrastructure here in South Africa?
Sure. So I think in the past, people assume that, okay, it's space, you've got to have all these super expensive and specialized industries around you. But surprisingly, you'll find that we use quite a lot of local suppliers for helping build our hardware and our technology. And I think also you need to connect space with how it fits into other people's lives. And really, space is there to serve a need. It's not just to go there for the sake of going there. So people are using space now more and more for things like Internet of Things and communications and making more informed decisions about the state of your company's infrastructure or logistics or your country. So I think when space becomes more integrated and with the economy, I think that's where we'll really see it flourishing.
So you're telling me, if I am an 8-year-old boy or an 8-year-old girl sitting at home watching this going, I also want to work in space, that's a realistic dream for somebody in South Africa.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Fantastic. I'm telling my kids that right now.